and even a surprisingly catchy country song called Fenced in No More that somehow cracked the Billboard charts, thanks to its killer fiddle solo and lyrics about bureaucratic rebellion. The once quiet street leading to my property now featured a historical marker detailing the Great HOA Revolt of 2023, placed right next to Karen's former driveway, where tourists regularly took selfies flipping off the spot her mansion once stood, while the new community garden, planted where she'd once tried to find me for excessive sunflower growth, flourished with organic vegetables and a bronze plaque honoring the spirit of neighborhood resilience. I'd become something between a local legend and an accidental activist, fielding calls from homeowners across the country seeking advice on fighting their own HOA tyrants. My binder of evidence now enshrined in the County Law Library as Exhibit A in Citizen versus Bureaucracy seminars taught at the local college. The most surreal moment came when the governor, smelling political opportunity, invited me to testify at the state capitol about property rights, where my unscripted rant about little Napoleons with clipboards somehow translated into sweeping HOA reform legislation they called the Karen Act, limiting fines, banning selective enforcement, and requiring all board members to pass basic ethics training. Back home, the neighborhood had transformed into something out of a Norman Rockwell painting crossed with a Texas version of Woodstock. Kids rode bikes without helmets. Christmas decorations stayed up until March if people felt like it. And the annual block party now featured a bonfire where residents ceremonially burned copies of old violation notices while a bluegrass band played. My stable became ground zero for this quiet revolution, hosting monthly Freedom Fries potlucks, where former HOA targets traded war stories over heaping plates of comfort food, their laughter mixing with the sound of my horses contentedly munching hay in the background. Even the wildlife seemed to celebrate. Deer that Karen had once tried to have relocated for aesthetic reasons now lounged boldly in front yards. A family of foxes made their den under what remained of a rose garden, and the barred owls that nested in my pecan tree produced triple the usual owlets that year, as if nature itself was giving the whole neighborhood a thumbs up. The final cosmic joke came when a Hollywood producer offered to buy the rights to my story for 6 figures, enough to finally build that dream extension on the ranch, and the contract arrived on the same day Karen's bankruptcy notice was published in the paper, her signature scrawled weekly across documents, surrendering what few assets she had left. These days when I give interviews, reporters always ask if I hate Karen, and I've learned to smile and say what they want to hear before changing the subject to more important things, like the rescue Mustangs I've started fostering with my settlement money, or the free legal clinic I fund for homeowners fighting unfair fines, or the way the morning light hits the wildflowers these days with a particular golden glow that no HOA rule could ever improve upon. The truth is, I don't think about her much anymore, except maybe when I'm signing copies of my surprisingly popular memoir at the local bookstore, or accepting the key to the city from a mayor who once ignored my complaints, or watching the neighborhood kids play hide-and-seek around the new community sculpture made from melted-down HOA violation signs. Life's too short to dwell on Karens of the world when there's fresh coffee on the porch, horses to ride, and an entire community outside my fence living proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. A year to the day after Karen's sentencing, I found myself standing in the exact spot where she'd orchestrated my arrest. Only this time, instead of handcuffs, I was holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors as the mayor praised me for community heroism while cutting the ribbon on Oak Meadows' first ever neighborhood ranch day. My property now officially designated as a local historic agricultural site thanks to some clever paperwork and a sympathetic county commissioner who'd grown up hating HOAs as much as I did. The transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. Where Karen's regime had once fined people for leaving garbage cans out 5 minutes too long, the new board, headed by former victim Mrs. Henderson, had instituted Freedom Fridays, where residents could basically do whatever they wanted as long as it didn't endanger lives or property values, leading to a delightful chaos of front yard vegetable gardens, brightly painted fences, and even one particularly glorious rebel who kept a life-size dinosaur sculpture in their flower bed. My ranch, once the neighborhood pariah, had become its crown jewel. School groups came for tours to learn about sustainable farming. Local artists set up easels to paint the rustic scenery. and the HOA actually paid me a stipend to maintain the historical character of my land, which mostly meant I got taxpayer money to drink sweet tea on my porch while watching the sunset over my now perfectly legal wildflowers. The real poetic justice came when the community voted to convert Karen's former McMansion into the new clubhouse after the bank foreclosed on it. Walking through those once pristine halls now filled with kids' finger paintings and bake sale flyers, seeing the granite countertops where Karen used to plot her tyranny now stained with coffee rings from neighborhood poker nights, watching her precious formal living room become the new HOA Oversight Committee office where residents could review all financial records anytime they pleased. It was enough to make even my stoic old ranch hands crack a smile. The local news did a follow-up story they call From Tyranny to Transparency that somehow made me look like some kind of grassroots democracy hero instead of just a pissed-off rancher who got lucky with a loophole. And I've never been more grateful for Texas libel laws because when Karen inevitably saw it from her new job selling used cars in Oklahoma, turns out prison time makes luxury community consultant gigs hard to come by. Any lawsuit threats got laughed right out of her public defender's office. These days, when I ride the fence line at dusk, the only paperwork I worry about is whether I remember to sign the permission slip for the 4-H Club's upcoming visit. The only fines I deal with are the ones I impose on myself for being too lazy to fix that squeaky barn door. And the only rules that matter are the ones that keep my horses happy and my land free. Sometimes neighbors ask if I ever hear from Karen, and I just shrug while secretly knowing that her probation officer emails me quarterly updates, a condition I may have slipped into the civil settlement. The latest one reporting that she got written up for creating a hostile work environment at the dealership by trying to institute a dress code for customers. Some habits die harder than others, I guess. As for me, I'm too busy enjoying the sweetest revenge of all, living well on my own terms, with the front gate wide open and a brand new sign that reads no solicitors, no HOAs, and absolutely no Karens allowed. The end. The morning of Karen's sentencing hearing dawned with a kind of perfect clarity that only comes after a summer storm. The air crisp, the sky so blue it hurt to look at, and me standing in front of my closet debating whether justice called for my Sunday best or the same dirt-stained ranch clothes I'd been wearing the day she had me arrested, ultimately settling on a sharp black blazer over my favorite rodeo t-shirt because nothing says, "I told you so" quite like sartorial symbolism. The courthouse was packed tighter than a cattle truck when I arrived, every seat filled with neighbors who'd suddenly discovered their inner courtroom drama enthusiast, their whispers creating a buzzing undercurrent that silenced instantly when the bailiff led Karen in wearing an orange jumpsuit that did absolutely nothing for her complexion, her formerly perfect hair now pulled into a greasy ponytail, her hands cuffed in front of her like some sad parody of the power pose she used to strike. During HOA meetings, the prosecutor presented his case with the relish of a chef serving up a 5-star meal. Each piece of evidence, the forged documents, the embezzled funds, the secret Venmo payments to her manicurist from the HOA account, landing like a hammer blow as Karen's lawyer kept objecting with increasingly desperate lack of foundation arguments that the judge overruled. So often it became almost rhythmic. Then came my turn to deliver the victim impact statement. And as I walked to the podium, I could feel the weight of every unfair fine, every sleepless night worrying about losing my ranch, every ounce of humiliation from that mugshot photo crystallizing into something diamond hard and razor sharp in my chest. I didn't need notes. I'd lived this speech every day for months. And when I locked eyes with Karen and began describing how it felt to be handcuffed on my own property, while she smirked, how the terror of potentially losing generations of family heritage had kept me awake counting cracks in the ceiling, how her petty tyranny had turned our peaceful neighborhood into some dystopian homeowners association horror story, I watched her carefully maintained mask finally shatter, her face crumpling like a paper bag as the reality of her situation truly hit her for the first time. The judge's sentencing was a masterpiece of judicial poetry. 36 months in state prison, full restitution to the HOA, which conveniently my lawsuit had already drained her assets to cover, and 500 hours of community service cleaning public parks. The irony of the HOA queen picking up trash almost made me laugh out loud. When the gavel came down with that final, satisfying crack, the courtroom erupted in a wave of cathartic applause that the bailiffs didn't even bother to stop. And as they led Karen away, her shoulders slumped, her orange jumpsuit swallowing what little dignity she had left, she turned for one last look at me, expecting maybe to see me gloating or smirking, but instead finding me perfectly still, my face an unreadable blank. Because the truth was, in that moment I felt nothing at all, not anger, not joy, just the quiet certainty of scales finally balanced. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed like flies on week-old barbecue, shouting questions about how it felt to bring down the HOA queen, but I just tipped my hat and kept walking to where my truck was parked, the afternoon sun warm on my back, the keys jingling in my pocket, sounding like freedom as I drove past the neighborhood entrance, where they'd already taken down the old HOA sign and replaced it with a simple, "Welcome to Oak Meadows," where community means respect. That night back at the ranch, I sat on my porch with a cold beer and watched the fireflies dance over the pasture where this whole mess had started, listening to the crickets chirp their approval as my horses grazed peacefully in the moonlight, their tails swishing contentedly, completely unaware that their stubborn, grass-munching existence had been the linchpin in bringing down a petty tyrant. And as I took one last swig of my beer before heading inside, I made a silent toast to the simple, unshakable truth that had carried me through this whole ordeal. In the battle between a determined rancher and a power-hungry HOA Karen, always bet on the one who knows how to dig in their heels and wait for the storm to pass. The weeks following Karen's spectacular downfall unfolded with a delicious slow-motion devastation of a billionaire's yacht sinking in shark-infested waters. First came the newspaper headlines screaming, "HOA Queen be stung by own honey," above photos of Karen's perp walk that somehow captured both her runny mascara and the shocked faces of her former sycophants. Then the avalanche of resignations from board members suddenly claiming they'd always had concerns. Funny how those concerns only surfaced once the handcuffs came out, followed by the glorious spectacle of our neighborhood's newly elected interim board, led by sweet old Mrs. Henderson, who'd been quietly documenting Karen's abuses for years, hosting an emergency transparency meeting, where they revealed the full extent of the embezzlement while serving store-bought cookies that tasted like victory. My ranch, once the target of endless violation notices, suddenly became hallowed ground. Neighbors I'd never met showing up with casseroles and bottles of wine, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear as they casually mentioned how quaint my rustic fence looked, how charming my wildflowers were, how maybe the HOA should consider adding a ranch aesthetic to the approved styles list. The county prosecutor, smelling blood in the water and an easy win for his re-election campaign, took personal interest in Karen's case, uncovering a trail of financial crimes stretching back 6 years that included fake vendors, forged signatures, and a particularly bold scheme where she'd been renting out the community clubhouse for private weddings and pocketing the cash. Turns out those emergency roof repairs she'd been collecting special assessments for had actually funded her daughter's destination wedding in Cabo. A fact that emerged when the local news station obtained photos of Karen toasting with champagne under a palapa while the rest of us got notices about shared sacrifice. Meanwhile, my previously ignored lawsuit about wrongful arrest and harassment moved through the courts with surprising speed, the judge practically salivating as my lawyer presented evidence that Karen had personally falsified violation reports against me, including one dated for a week I'd been hospitalized with pneumonia. Hard to mow your lawn when you're on a ventilator, leading to a settlement so generous it paid for the new stable I'd been dreaming about, plus a very satisfying suck-it. Karen neon sign for my porch that the new board graciously approved as historical art. Karen's McMansion sold at auction faster than a hotcake at a fat camp, the new owners immediately tearing down her precious white picket fence, which, irony of ironies, violated setback regulations, while her husband filed for divorce so quickly the paperwork probably left skid marks, taking what was left of their savings and moving to Florida, where, last I heard, Karen was working as a luxury community consultant, which in Floridian translates to selling timeshares to snowbirds while wearing too much bronzer. Back home, the HOA underwent reforms so sweeping they made the Magna Carta look like a post-it note, term limits implemented, financial audits required, and most importantly, an agricultural exemption clause added that made my ranch untouchable for as long as grass grows and horses poop. The final satisfying twist came when the IRS,